Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Lily. I am so happy that you are here with me today. In today's video, we are going to get grungy. We are going to get messy, but we're going to have so much fun because I am here to show you how I grungy up my papers. How I take plain copy paper, just plain copy paper. I'll show you which one I use in just a second, and how I transform it into beautiful grungy papers. These are so grungy. If you watched my last flip through video, I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to link it right here so you can go take a look at how I use the grungy papers in my journals. I got a lot of requests to show you how I grungy up my papers. And look at that. Grungy, 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 and just grungy. Let's see. I'm going to show you the whole thing, the whole process. And it's going to be so messy, but it is going to be so awesome. Watch, just wait and see. I'm also going to give you a flip through of all of the pages I've already done off camera so that you can take a really good look at what they look like. But they are just so, look at this one. Super grungy. And it's just by using plain copy paper. And let me show you which one I use. This is the copy paper I use, and it is a brand that I purchased at Costco. It is Advantage. It is 24-pound weight, and it has a 97 brightness, but that doesn't matter because we're going to grungy it up anyway. And there are, how many pages? There are 800 pages in this package. That is a lot of copy paper. I go through a lot of copy paper, not just in junk journals, but also in my office. And this is a great deal. It's normally about $9.99 at Costco, but if you wait until it goes on sale, there's a coupon discount and it's like $7.99. Great deal for all of this paper. So this is what I use, and I will have all of that information in the description area below. I'm also going to show you all the different inks and things that you can use to grungy up your papers because there is so much going on in these. I've used coffee, I've used distress inks, I've used oxide inks, I've used all kinds of different sprays. I've even used DIY inks that I made by putting an old dried up marker in water and in a spray bottle. And I'm going to show you all the different things that I have in my stash to give you an idea of all the different types of colorants or inks that you can use to grungy up your papers. It's going to be so much fun. You're going to get ink on your hands. I'm just letting you know that. I'm okay with it, but that's the fun part. Okay. Are you ready to get started? If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments section below. It is a somewhat long video, but I am going to show you step by step how I grungy up my papers. Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm going to show you a travel journal that I just made for myself. I thought it would be fun to show you how I use these junky papers in a journal like this. So don't go away because we're going to be flipping through the pages of this gorgeous journal. So cute. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.
I'm going to begin by showing you all of these grungy papers that I've already made off camera. And these are in fact some of the ones that I used in that last junk journal flip through. I have that in the description area below. And these really caught your attention. I know I pointed them out and I told you that I grungied them up, but I really got a lot of positive feedback on these, and many of you asked to see my process. And so I really, really love the way these turned out. These have been stained about 2 or 3 times. I just run them through the stain, and I will show you exactly how we do that. And I love this floral stamp. So aside from using all of the inks that I mentioned earlier, I'm also going to use stamps, and I'll talk about that in just a second. I had some black ink left over after I was doing some origami, and I didn't want that ink to go to waste, and so I put a little quote on there, so just so it doesn't go to waste. So you'll notice on some of these that are already inked up, there are some stamped images in the background, and I will talk about I will actually show you some of the stamps that I used to create those backgrounds. And there are some botanicals, some leaves, Oh, that one's nice. That green tint in there. I just love it. There's also script in the background, and sometimes there's a combination of script and botanicals and florals. And I used just a variety of stamps from my stash here. I used butterflies, and I was playing around and I was experimenting with different looks, and I was having so much fun. I was pointing out right there that you could see that I used some Distress Oxide inks, and I just loved what that created on paper. And I'll point that out again in just a moment. Now I will go through this other stack of papers. These are not quite finished, but they have gone through inks maybe a couple times, about twice. So that is the reason you can see a lot of variations in the color, and you'll see lots of that ink blotching on there, and I just love that. This reminds me a lot of jelly printing, and the method that we're going to work with is kind of similar to jelly printing, maybe just a little bit. It's really just smooshing. It's the smoosh technique. I don't even know how else to say it. But it's I'm going to work directly on my glass surface. And look at this one. This one I really love. It looks like clouds. It looks like the sky to me. And this one I actually used paint water. And I'm going to show you my paint water in just a minute. And that is in fact how all of this got started. I had this beautiful paint water. It was like a brown. It was just all kinds of stuff was going on there. And oh my gosh, look at these papers. Those have been through the staining about 2 or 3. There's about 2 or 3 layers of ink staining on those last ones I just showed you. So this is the white paper, just like I showed you earlier. I will have that information in the description area below. I'll see if I can find it on Amazon, and if it's there, I'll have my Amazon affiliate link down below. But like I mentioned, you can find this paper at Costco. Okay, what was I saying? I started to say something and I completely forgot. Remind me in the comments. But I'm going to work directly on the glass mat that I have. Oh, I was playing around with paint water. That's what happened. I was playing around with paint water, and I'll get back to that in just a second. This was an empty container of Distress Oxide, but there was still some ink residue in that little bottle, so I just filled it up with water. And so whatever you have, I'm showing you all the different inks. There's my paint water, but that's a newer paint water. The one that prompted all of this was a different paint water. This bottle contains marker. So if you have a dried up marker, put it in a jar and let it sit there for several days. The dried up marker will actually tint the water, and then you can put it in a spray bottle and tint your papers. And those are old. I did those in 2020, you guys. And then I also went through my stash. I've got Distress inks. I've got old Recollections inks. And I also have, this is a new one. This is Dina Wakley, and it is a glossy gold. You know how I just love the gold. I can't get enough of it. Distress Oxides. The point is, use whatever you have. So I'm showing you all the different things that I'm pulling, even old stamps from Stampin' Up. Just whatever you have to create like a watercolor. That's what we're going to do. So that cup has some coffee, and it was a second go round of a K-cup. So I made my K-cup coffee, and then that same little K-cup that was in the machine, I ran it again. It was kind of weak, so then I sprinkled a little bit of instant coffee. That is what I did. And so I take my little heart wooden spoon, splatter a little bit of it onto the glass mat, and then I took some of that old Recollections spray. And when I say old, I mean old like 2015 old. But I love that color. It's gorgeous. And look at how these colors coordinate. Absolutely gorgeous. So what I do, and you'll see, because I'm going to go through this several times using different types of inks to give you an example of all the different color variations and ink washes that you can make with whatever it is that you have. So I grab my clean copy paper, place it right on top of the glass mat, pick up some of that watercolor, and then I blot it with another copy paper. And it's really just layering one paper on top of the next. And once I get it to look the way I want, then I set it aside to dry. And I don't want to set my paper aside when it's too wet with color. And so that is the reason why I am blotting it with another piece of copy paper. Handle your copy paper with care, because once you get it wet, it becomes fragile. You know, you could tear easily. So just be gentle when you're lifting it. And you'll see what I'm talking about as I'm blotting with copy paper over copy paper and just kind of layering. I'll sandwich papers and just create a messy watercolor look on all of these papers. I have a repurposed spray bottle and it just has water in it, and I'm using it to disperse the color. And then I have my silicone spatula, and you know, again, just to spread a little bit of color onto the glass mat. I don't put too much thought into this, because the messier it looks, the better your results are going to be. And if you have some areas that don't get any ink on them, some of that white area looks pretty cool once it's dried. I think you will like that. And you'll see that in some of these inked papers that I create. So notice how I sandwiched that paper between two clean sheets of copy paper. That's so the other papers absorb some of that excess moisture, and it's not overly saturated with color. I don't want it dripping with color. When I place it or when I set it aside to dry, I don't want it dripping at all. This is a beautiful color. And again, I'm mixing it. So I will use a little bit of the coffee and then a little bit of color. Sometimes I don't use coffee at all. But I love just reaching and grabbing and coloring the glass mat and then picking it up with the paper and all of these great variations. The surface I am setting the papers aside on is a large poster board that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And I use those poster boards as my backdrop for taking pictures of like my journals when I post it on Etsy. Anyway, it's a very large poster board. I have it on the side, and that is where I am placing my papers. And I am just placing my papers one on top of the other. And I leave them there to dry. Sometimes I don't get back to those papers for a week. And I do know it can take a couple of days for them to dry because I'm layering. And believe it or not, they don't stick to each other. Once they are dry, they are completely separate. So they don't stick to each other, which is so nice. I've now taken some distress ink and I've smushed it onto the glass mat, added a little bit of water so that that ink disperses, and then why not some ink sprays and maybe even a little bit of coffee. And you're probably thinking, if you're going to use some distress ink, which is brown, why add the coffee? Because when it dries, you'll get different gradations of color, different gradations of brown. And it looks really cool. On some of them I added coffee, and then others I didn't. You'll see throughout this process all the different color combinations. And again, I did not put a lot of thought into this. I was just kind of reaching and playing around with the color and making a mess. Now I did say that your hands will get inky, but when it was all said and done, my hands did not look that bad. I do use two different types of Distress ink. I have the Distress Vintage Photo, but then I also use Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo, and they will each give different results, and I'll point those out in just a moment. This is one of my DIY ink colors, and I took a dried up marker, let it sit in water for a while, and then I got this beautiful purple shade. And as much as I struggle working with the color purple, this one turned out so beautiful. And then when it dried, it was a very beautiful and soft color, and it coordinated so well with the coffee and the browns and just everything else that is going on. So if you have dried up markers, don't give up on those. Put them in a glass of water. Let them sit there for a few days, because all of that dried up color from the marker. So you'll have to take a marker apart, and then that colored felt stick that is in the marker, that's what you're going to put in some water. Let it sit there for a while. Let it sit there for a few days. The color will seep out, tint the water, and then you can leave it in a jar, or you can put it in a spray bottle like I have, and then use it like this to tint your pages. And look at how beautiful that color combination is. I made these back in 2020 when I was first visiting my parents. Little backstory. I was in California from 2010 through 2020, and then in 2020 I came back and moved back to Utah. But before that, I was on vacation, in quotation marks, here in Utah. And I was staying at my parents' house. And I didn't bring any crafting supplies with me. And there are a few videos that I made. If you go back through my channel and you look at videos that I made in early 2020, I was challenging myself to be creative and just work with found objects. And that is when I made these DIY ink colors. So I've had these for a while, kind of forgot about them, and I started using them for this project. So let me tell you how this all got started with a jar of paint water. I was painting and, cleaning out my brushes in my glass jar. And when I'm done painting, you have this paint water that is really murky. You've been cleaning your brushes in there. But I didn't want it to go to waste. I thought, I wonder if I could dye papers with this. And so I took some of the paint water, put it on my glass mat, and started cleaning it up with scrap pieces of paper. And I really liked the results. And so I used it all up, and I dyed some of those papers. In fact, some of those papers that were in that previous junk journal have paint water. So I don't have that paint water anymore because, I used it all up. And then I started I started going through all of my ink colors and creating different colors on the glass mat. If you don't have a glass mat, you can also use a plastic bag. And I've done that as well. You cut open a grocery bag, a plastic bag, and create a little puddle of water, and then do your staining directly on that plastic bag, and it works. It works great. In hindsight, I should have demoed that in this video, but I didn't think about it until just now. So notice how I grabbed an old Stampin' Up! Ink pad. And when I say old, it is old. I can't use it for stamping projects because the felt is breaking apart. But I didn't want to throw it away because it's a beautiful green color. And so smooshing it on the glass mat was perfect. I may end up putting that whole thing into a glass jar and tinting some water. But for now, tinting it on the glass and then adding some water is working out well. So even those old stamps that you have, if you soak those in water, that may work as well. So you don't have to have anything fancy. Let's work with what you have. I know it's super fun to be able to have all of the great ink sprays that are out there. The Distress line, they have amazing colors. I have some of those. Ranger has different designers that have different sprays, yeah, those are fantastic, but we can DIY them as well. This is another marker bottle. This is a much darker one. This one resulted in a very dark and kind of murky color. But when it dried, it looked really good, really good. And I'm setting them all aside. In fact, I'm going to bring in a little while, did I mention this yet? Maybe not. In a little while, I am going to bring in and show you, kind of give you a glimpse of that poster board. I won't be able to show you the entire poster board because I'm just going to pass it, pass it under the camera just to show you that I am just layering the papers just one on top of the other. And they, you know, like I said, they dry just fine. And you know who I learned that from? Years ago, about 4 years ago, I was watching a video from Artie Mays, and she was dyeing some papers. And then she would say, and I'm just setting them up right in front of me to dry, 2 or 3 at a time. I just stack them on top of each other, let them dry. They don't stick together. And so then I tried that. That was several years ago. I tried it and it works. Here is my poster board with all of my papers just kind of stacked on top of each other. They're all wet. They're all inked and stained. And I'm just going to set it aside. And I'm just putting one on top of the other. I'm setting them aside so they can dry. So those are going to be there for a couple days to dry. Okay, so I've showed you the ones I made off camera. I showed you the stack of papers like these that I've already, you know, gone through a couple of times. I'm going to select a few that maybe I've only stained a couple of times. And I like to give them about three stains, because then you get more grunge and more color variations. So I selected a couple of sheets that don't look like they've been, that look like they've only been stained once or twice. And I'm going to give them that third staining. So I'm just going to add some color on the glass mat and continue to stain them. I keep the stack of papers nearby. I work with paint. I work with watercolor sometimes when I'm playing around. And what I've decided to do is, instead of cleaning up that excess watercolor or sprays or paint or whatever on my glass mat, instead of using a towel to clean that up, I'm now cleaning it up with my papers. And that's adding a lot more interest, and it's a lot more fun to create grungy papers just by cleaning up your inky mess instead of letting all of that beautiful color go to waste on a towel. So that is what I'm doing with these. And I'm just showing you kind of what my process is. So there's about 3 steps. You know, you let them dry and then bring them back in. Look at the oxide on this paper. It dries differently. It oxidizes. And it gives it another layer of interest. So I'm going to use a little bit of this Tim Holtz's Distress Oxide ink in Vintage Photo. A little bit of that spray. Add a little bit of water. And I'm just going to mop it up with one of the pre-inked papers. Again, to add more dimension, more interest. And then once it dries, that oxide is going to look so cool on the paper, and you'll be able to distinguish it from all of the other colors that are on the paper. It's pretty cool to see that. It's like a little science experiment almost. And I don't need a lot of color. Sometimes it's just a little bit of color in the center of it, maybe around the edges. This one, the ones that you see with a lot of turquoise, I used paint water for those. And the paint water that I have left over is from a DIY paint. It's Debbie's Design Diary. It's her line of DIY paint. It is clay-based. And so what it did is it left like a chalky feeling on the paper. And I only did a few pages like that because I will be using these in journals. Maybe I'm thinking not everyone wants that chalky feeling. I was pointing out that that was like 3 layers of color variations on that one paper. And I don't know. I looked away. Did I already show you? Did I already pour some of that paint water on, some of that turquoise paint water on the glass mat? If I haven't, I may do it again. We'll see. I don't remember. Oh my gosh, I got distracted. But it looks really cool. I don't mind it. It looks really nice. Okay, I'm showing you the stamps that I use. These are IOD stamps, Iron Orchid Design stamps. These are all the different stamps that I have. These are large because they are meant for home decor. But I just love this line of stamps. And they're large, and so they cover a lot of real estate on your papers. And I'm going to start with this one. I will list in the description area below all of the names of all of these stamps. So just open up that description area. And I buy mine from Jamie Ray Vintage. I will link her channel and then her store down below. That's where I buy my stamps. She has an online store. I am lucky that I live down the street from her shop here in Lehigh. And so I can just pop into her shop and buy them there. But she does have them available online. I took a little bit of that distress and I just very haphazardly added ink to the stamp. I don't want an even impression. And so now I'm just placing it over to give a very subtle, scripty background. And I'm not going to re-ink it with the ink pad. I'm just going to reactivate that ink with some water. And then that'll leave like a second generation stamping, and it turns out really nice. This rubber stamp is also really cool. It is called Le Courrier, and it's of French newsprint. And again, just haphazardly adding ink to the stamp, and then you get a very faded, very washed out image. And that's exactly what I want, because these are going to be used for journals, and I want that stamped image to be in the background, because I plan on writing on those pages, adding other things on top, ephemera, pictures, just everything on top. And so I'm really just creating a background with different colors and different stamped images. You can use, if you have similar stamps, smaller newsprint or music notes or other script, you can just randomly stamp it throughout your paper. So I also have some of these Tim Holtz rubber stamps, and these are really cool. These are like tattered doilies, and I'll list the ones that I'm using down below in the description area. And if I miss anything, please do not hesitate to ask. Sometimes I forget to mention things, and I sometimes forget to add them in the description area. But leave me a comment down below. I reply to every single one of my comments and your questions, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So these look really cool. Again, just haphazardly adding some ink, and then I'll add a little bit of water to give it an even more distressed look. I'm not looking for a perfect stamped image. The messier, the grungier, the better. And I just love how all of this looks. In fact, I think this page that I'm working on right there, I used one of my DIY inks to stain it, and you could see how awesome that looks. All of those different colors and that grunginess there. So that looks really, really cool. This is another really cool stamp to use by Tim Holtz. It's, I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but it's like bubbles. And it looks really, really cool. I'm sure if I gave it a really pristine impression, it would look pretty cool. but I'm just very lightly tapping it. But that one's really, really cool. So go through your stamps. If you were a rubber stamper and you were scrapbooking and making cards like I was, I have a lot of rubber stamps and I don't get rid of any. I have Stampin' Up! Stamps that I've had for 20 years, 20 plus years. I have Close to My Heart stamps. I've got, Tim Holtz stamps and thrifted stamps. I like stamps, and I used to be a card maker. Actually, I still make cards. So let's, if you were anything like me, you probably have a collection of rubber stamps that you can use to create these, grungy background looks. So let's, dive into our stash. Here's one that I've not used. So some of these I buy and then I don't use them for a while. This is one of those. This one is really pretty. So I want to show you that if you don't have large stamps like the IOD stamps, you can use smaller stamps and then just randomly stamp them on your paper, and you're going to get a grungy look anyway. You can use large florals. That would be nice too. Or scripted, and I think I mentioned music. Music stamps would be really cool in the background. And then spraying them. These are brand new. I've not used these. I think I got these right around Christmas time because I had a project in mind and I just didn't get around to it. But these are really, really nice. And again, I will list all of the supplies in the description area below. I mentioned earlier that I will do a flip through of the travel journal that I made for myself. And it's not complete, so it's just the pages that I've created, and I've made one signature, and I'm going to flip through those pages that I put into that cover. Okay, so this is one of my favorite stamps. It is an IOD stamp set, and it's called Painterly Roses. I'm only going to use, for the sake of the video, I'm only going to use 2 of the stamps. I'm going to take one of the florals, one of the roses, and then one of the leaves. But these stamps are meant to be layered so that you can create some stamped roses with a lot of dimension. But I'm only going to use one. And that's what I did in the other ones, in the ones I showed you earlier. That was a lot of ink that I put on that glass mat. That was... I didn't think I'd end up with so much ink on the glass mat, but I dropped the stamp pad. And that is such a beautiful color by Stampin' Up. I struggle with the Stampin' Up stamps because they're kind of, the older ones are tricky to open. The newer ones, not so much, but, I like it when they just open like, the distressing pads. I don't want to fuss opening a stamp pad. But the colors are so beautiful. So I made a mess on the glass mat with the ink, and I'm just going to use it to stamp my rose stamp and then just randomly stamp those roses around the border of the paper. And I know it looks kind of crazy. It's like, what are you doing? That doesn't look nice. Well, it's not supposed to look nice. We want it to look grungy. You have to trust the process, because once it's all done, once you get all of the layers of your color, stamping is optional. You don't have to stamp it, but I like to stamp it. And I don't stamp all of the papers. I do stamp a few. Just trust the process, because it will look fantastic. So I'm randomly stamping the flowers, and then I'm going to go in just a moment with the leaf stamp, and then just kind of randomly add that leaf stamp, and you'll see that in just a moment. So I'm just going to finish. I'm only going to do a couple of these just so you could see that I'm just, doing random, very light-handed stamping. I would have never, this is what's funny, you guys. I would have never ever stamped like this when I started out with Stampin' Up! In the late 90s. Because I was a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator for a long time. I got into it in the late 90s. And I needed to make sure that all of my stamping was perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, I wouldn't use it. And, you know, it was all about perfection. And after a couple years, it was too clean. And I started kind of going astray. And this is before I even knew who Tim Holtz was. And I started going astray and started, you know, my work started getting kind of messy. And then, like right around that same time, I discovered Tim Holtz. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life? And so then, you know, here we are now. Here we are now with random stamping. Oh, okay. I'm getting sidetracked. I'm not going to let all that beautiful pink color go to waste. So you saw I'm adding coffee, I'm adding water, and I am going to clean it up with my copy paper. And this is exactly what I'm talking about on how all of this got started. Whatever color landed on my glass mat, I was picking up with scrap pieces of paper, and I liked the look. And so now I made it a thing for my junky, grungy papers. They're not really junky papers because it is new copy paper. But I could repurpose other kinds of paper and do this. I also did this with vintage music paper, and it turned out fantastic. So beautiful. And I know this color looks kind of bright right now. They actually look a lot brighter when they're wet, but once they dry, the colors are a little bit subdued. And at the very end, I'm actually going to show you what all of these look like once they're dried. I let a few days go by because I did leave them on the poster board for 3 or 4 days and before I got back to it again. But I will be showing you at the end of the video how these dried and what they look like. And you can just keep going because like jelly printing, you add paint and then you take you pull another paper. That's why I was referencing jelly printing, that, you know, they're very similar in a way where you just can't stop. When you're jelly printing, you add paint to your jelly plate and then you're just pulling a print and then you add a little bit more paint, pull a few more prints, and you can keep going on and on and on. This is basically the same thing. You add more coffee, you add more color, and you just keep going and going and going, and all of a sudden, you've inked 100 pages and you didn't even realize it. So, and the more color and the more water that you add, you start bringing in more copy paper to clean it all up, and it just goes from there. This is a lot of fun, you guys. It really is a lot of fun, especially as you're watching all of the different colors play with each other. It's so much fun. I hope that you give this a try and that you're not intimidated to make a mess. Clear your area beforehand if you don't want to get anything around you messy. I have a dedicated area. I have a dedicated table, a dedicated space, and I have a rug. So if anything falls on the floor, the rug is going to catch it. It's not going to stain the carpet. And I make a mess sometimes. And the paint splatters are on everything. I splattered my coffee cup. What else? Everything has splatters. Everything. My storage containers, my stapler, everything that's nearby is splattered with paint. But I love the way that looks. I'm a little bit messy. So I'm getting to the end. I finally decided, okay, that's it. I'm not going to add any more color. I need to keep moving on with the video. This is another old ink pad, old where it's almost dry. And you'll see that when I stamp that leaf, how it's barely visible. But I don't mind because I want it to kind of look like it's in the background. And this is a beautiful leaf stamp. So now I'm just going to go right around and stamp right alongside those roses. Some of the color did bleed through the pages, but it actually looked really cool once it was dry. And that's one of the reasons why I did like a second generation stamp. I didn't want to saturate the color, the paper with too much of that ink, because I didn't want it bleeding through. Just a very second generation, very light hand. But with this green one, I didn't even have to do a light hand. In fact, I'm pressing it down firmly. It's just because it is so dry. Some of these stamps go way back to the late 90s. I kid you not. Old stamps. But I just can't seem to get rid of them. Even though they're nearly dry, some of those colors have been discontinued. I can't even get refills for them anymore. But do you want to know what I do with some of these older ones? I just add water. I add water to some of those old stamps, and you know what? They work. Stampin' Up! Police isn't going to come after me because I added water to my ink pads. Okay, so one of the fun things that I like to do is add gold splatters to everything. I don't have any Heidi Swapp gold shine anymore. I used it all up. But I have this really cool gold tempera paint. And, you know, working on a glass mat is fantastic because you can work directly on the glass mat. You don't need a paint tray, a palette, just right on the glass. So I squeezed some of that gold tempera paint, added some water because I am going to create some splashes with my little fan brush onto as many papers as I can. I have purchased other gold paints like you saw earlier. I showed you the Dina Wakley gold paint, the glossy gold paint, and that I haven't used that one yet. I have other gold inks that I could use. Like I'm on the hunt to find something that is as close to the Heidi Swapp gold shine that I absolutely loved. And it just breaks my heart that there is no more Heidi Swapp gold shine. It was my absolute favorite product of all time. And if you've been following me for a while, I'm sure you know how much I loved that Heidi Swapp gold shine. I do have it in other colors. I have one in green, I have one in orange, and they're beautiful, but nothing like that gold shine. But this tempera paint, when it dried, it looks really, really nice. So give me all the gold. I love all the gold. All I'm saying is the gold shine was my favorite, but I love all the gold. I've even done this with metallic watercolors, and it looks beautiful. So if you like the gold splatters, use whatever gold you have. And this is where I made a mess with the splatters because not only did it get on the paper, but it also splattered everywhere. And I think I even got it on some of my clothing. So now I'm just adding a little bit of water over the leftover gold paint on the glass mat. And I'm cleaning it up with the paper because that's not going to waste either. It's going to look really pretty once it dries, all of that beautiful gold. The color combinations are so wonderful. Let me know what you think. I would really like to know if you think this will be fun, if you plan on giving this a try, if it's inspiring you. Are you craving to get messy with some markers? Even marker, like if you take marker and just run it across the glass mat and add water, that'll give you ink. Watercolor will also do the same thing. So go through all the colors that you have. You can even use watered down acrylic paint. Okay, so I'm bringing in my paint water. This is paint water after using and painting with DIY paint, which is clay based. I have it because I've been painting some, I'm doing some home decor, and as much as I want to use other colors, all of my furniture is painted turquoise. I love the color. I love the color turquoise, you guys. So I have this paint water, and so I am going to use it on the paper. It will dry with a chalky finish, but I don't mind that. Okay, let me show you my travel journal. And I made this very simple. I have this cover. I will link a video up above of the video showing you how I make these fabric covers. There is only one signature in this journal. Can you see the gold splatters? Those are from that tempera paint. Doesn't that look beautiful? And I haven't worked in this journal yet. I made it in advance because I am taking a birthday trip in August, and I'm taking this little journal with me. I want to be able to document, and I wanted it soft and easy to carry in my bag. But I want to show you here, these are all similar papers. All of the papers that we made in this session, these were made the exact same way. And look at how gorgeous this is. Some of the pink in there. I'm telling you, I made these papers the exact same way. You have some of that script stamp in the background. And then with these papers, I use some butterfly stamps. And then there is some of that DIY paint water in there. If you don't want your paper to be too chalky because of that clay-based paint, I took a towel and I just kind of wiped it off a little bit, and that seemed to help. That is the center of my signature. There is about 72 pages front and back. I think I used about 16 full-size grungy papers folded in half. And I used hemp twine to bind the papers. Can you see all the different gradations? And that's because I used coffee and oxide ink and distress ink all on the same paper. But when they dry, you get all those different looks. There's my DIY paint. So I love this journal so much. I know it's so different from all the other ones that I made because it doesn't have any embellishments, but I love it. And I hope that you do too. Don't go away. I'm going to turn the camera over. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you so much taking the time to hang out with me as we grungy up some plain white papers. I thought it would be fun to show you all of those papers that I set aside to dry. They've now dried, and I want to show you what those look like. And look at all the way. I didn't realize we had made all of these. That's quite the stack of papers. I didn't realize we had made so many. I want to show you what some of them look like, especially the pink ones. These are some of the pink ones, and look at how they dried. Now, remember, this is only step one of the staining because I like to run them at least 3 times through different colors to grungy them up even more. But look at how beautiful that pink looks. Look at that one. I think this one has pink, and then I can't remember if it was coffee or the distress ink in there. And then look at this one. That one just has a little bit of the pink on it. Here's this one with a little bit more pink. Anyway, I think they turned out really, really good. Let me grab a few others. This one I had already ran through inks a couple of times, and all I did is use it to mop up some of that gold paint. So I love how this one turned out. And then, oh, here's this one. So they shimmer a little bit, but we're not done. So just as you saw me use the stamping as like one of the final steps, I'll be doing that to these as well. This is one of the green ones that I used with that old Stampin' Up stamp. So nice. It kind of looks like a chartreuse color. I love how this one turned out. Here's another one. This one has a little bit of blue tint, and then with either some coffee or some of the distress ink.
And notice how there is some white space. I really like a little bit of that white space showing through. I don't want it to be too even, but these aren't done. I'm going to keep adding more, and you will see these in some of the future junk journals that I will be making. What I didn't mention is that I will be making a few of these, and I'm going to add them in my Etsy shop because I'm using these as like a travel journal, like I mentioned earlier, and I thought it would be fun. Maybe you are interested in some of these as well, so keep an eye out for that. I don't have them quite ready yet, but if you are interested in something like this, I will have these in my Etsy shop pretty soon. And I would love it if you like and share my video as well. Thank you so much again for being here with me, and I will see you next time. Bye!